Thank you, Jonathan, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we stay in the region. Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani has lambasted Israel for killing journalists working for its Al Jazeera network in the Gaza Strip, describing the deaths as crimes beyond imagination. This comes as reportedly 5 Al Jazeera journalists have been killed by an Israeli strike near Gaza City's Al-Shifa hospital. The Israeli military admitted in a statement that it targeted an Al Jazeera correspondent, Anas al-Sharif, labeling the reporter as a terrorist, saying that he had served as the head of a terrorist cell in Hamas. Now for this discussion, we go back to Jonathan Hoffman. He's a former vice president of Zionist Federation of the United Kingdom. Thank you, Jonathan, for staying with us. Now, Qatar's Prime Minister has condemned the killing of journalists, calling it a crime beyond imagination. How do you respond to these accusations, especially with Israel's claim being different?
Well, Israel says that it has documentary evidence that Anas al-Sharif was a terrorist. They published documentation previously that he was a leader of Hamas. And, it just depends who you believe. The IDF would claim that it certainly doesn't attack journalists for the sake of attacking journalists. That would be completely wrong. But there have been several cases where Palestinians have claimed to be journalists, and in fact, they've had terrorist connections, Hamas connections. So, all one can say is that the Israelis have published information to suggest that Anas al-Sharif was a Hamas leader.
And Jonathan, what steps can Israel take to balance military actions with the protection of journalists in conflict zones?
Well, international journalists are not allowed into Gaza. There have been a number of complaints from the BBC, journalists, from other journalists, that they're not allowed into Gaza. But the problem is, number one, obviously the safety factor. Number two, that everything that comes out of Gaza is vetted by Hamas. And so anything that comes out from Gaza through a journalist, one has to realize that unless Hamas approves of it, it won't be published.
Thank you.
So Israel, the morality, the IDF operates by very strong codes of ethics, codes of morals, and the idea that they would deliberately target journalists is just not credible.
Right. Thank you very much, Jonathan Hoffman, for always joining us and sharing your insight all the way from London. Now we move on to our next news. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is gravely concerned about the repeated targeting of journalists, his spokesperson said today, after 5 reporters were killed in an Israeli airstrike. His spokesperson said that reporters covering conflicts are afforded protection under international humanitarian law and must be able to carry out their work safely. Meanwhile, the United Nations Human Rights Office has also criticized Israel over the killings. In a post on X, the United Nations said it condemns the killing of the journalists and urged Israel to respect and protect all civilians, including members of the press, and to grant immediate, safe, and unhindered access to Gaza for all journalists. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Jonathan Hoffman. Thank you, Jonathan, for staying with us. Now, British Prime Minister has also expressed concern over the reported targeting of journalists. So, how's this condemnation in the context of international pressure on Israel to protect journalists regardless of what they are saying?
As I said before, Israel doesn't target journalists for the sake of it. There have been a number of cases where where Palestinians have posed as journalists, whereas in fact they've been associated with Hamas, or they've been even leaders of Hamas. It's all very well for Keir Starmer to warn Israel to protect journalists, but the fact is Israel would say, and the IDF would say, that they simply do not attack journalists for the sake of it. Why would they? The action of Israel is not popular anyway in the eyes of many world leaders, including Keir Starmer. So why would the IDF and Israel make things worse by deliberately targeting journalists? I personally don't believe they do deliberately target journalists. Where journalists are fake, where people say they're journalists, it's easy enough to put a jacket on saying journalist on the back. There's nothing to stop them doing that. So, we know that there have been a number of cases of people posing as journalists where they haven't been journalists.
Thank you.